That's how it ends. That's how we wrap up everything. Takahashi announces retirement. Tatsu makes a food joke. And they just walk off into the sunset, never to be seen again. Oh no.
Hey!
We are on the cusp, the eve of the release of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed DLC. What awaits, what lies beyond the door that stands in front of us, we do not know. But it's always fun to guess, am I right? So we're doing one last pre-release theory defending video where yes I, Jmulls, have to sit here in front of this microphone to defend and give my best defense that I possibly can to the audience's theories, no matter how wild, wacky, or even inconceivably wrong they are. I must sit here and defend them. We stand here today to see what you all got. Let's get right on into this. Chris Miller. The reason we don't see Pyra Mythra is cause they will both be killed near the beginning and will be a big motivator for Rex. Possibly the same applies to Mythra's kid, or some of the other Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 main party members that we have not seen. Would make sense why they have not been shown in the marketing, and make the "he's a heartless machine" line from Rex make more sense if Alvis just murdered two of his wives and his child, and honestly, I think there's actually some kind of credence to this. We have not seen Pyra or Mythra in the trailer, or in any of the promotional material for Future Redeemed, nor do we see them in the base game. This could mean one of two things in my mind. Either they're holding them off to be a surprise reveal while we are playing Future Redeemed, or something happened to them that's going to spur the development of, say, Glimmer and Rex, for instance, or some other character in the DLC. I think them dying within the confines of Ionios or being a way to do something with their Aegis core are probably the most likely candidates for what could happen to them or what's the state of Pyra and Mythra in the DLC. And yeah, that would be a good motivating reason for why Rex is teaming up with the Liberators and says he's a heartless machine, if that's not out of context. And he's not just, yelling at a coffee maker in Colony 9 or something. Which I kind of want to see, but at the same time, I think something happening to Pyra, Mythra, or possibly others that Rex cares about, which spurs his emotional development or engagement throughout Future Redeemed, I think is a highly probable way to go about this. I don't think they're going to be dead permanently. I think they'll just come back after the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. But having something to happen to them within the confines of Ionios, which operates in this separate shell of essentially reality, with its own rules and subsets in regards to death and rebirth and all that, I think that's possible. Now, kind of going off of that in a weird way, bear with me here. We go to L. Regulus, who says it's called Future Redeemed because Rex and Shulk are indirectly responsible for the creation of Ionios. Now, this one's an interesting one, because when we heard the name Future Redeemed, it threw me off guard. I expected something with either present, or now, or endless now, or origin to be in the title. I was not expecting future to be there whatsoever, because think of it like this. Xenoblade 1 dealt a lot with themes about the future and what the future may hold, so the DLC was called Future Connected. Xenoblade 2 dealt with a lot of past trauma and overcoming the obstacles and the pain that the past can linger on you. So we had a DLC that was a prequel with Toward the Golden Country that dealt with the source of a lot of that pain and emotional turmoil that many characters felt throughout Xenoblade 2. Xenoblade 3 dealt with the present, that whole state of time, and took place in a realm called Ionios, the Endless Now. So I expected the name of the DLC to be somewhere along that line, but it's called Future Redeemed. And here's the funny thing. If you do what I do, and you Googled Redeemed definition under Google, and you misspelled definition, that one's critical. The Oxford Languages Dictionary would give you two different answers. One, compensate for the faults or bad aspects of quote-unquote something, or, parentheses something. Or the other definition, gain or regain possession of something in exchange for payment. Either one of those could be it. Like we're trading something to preserve the future, which would have to take place in the present, or we're somehow saving the concept of the future in this DLC. Having Rex and Shulk be the reason for the creation of Ionios would be an interesting case, because we just don't know what Shulk and Rex are really doing with most of their free time, outside of Rex raising 3 kids. So they could have been onto something that will be expanded on in the DLC, And because of their respective actions in both of their worlds of Kevin and Agnes, it could lead to something, or this like overall feeling amongst the general populace where they fear the activation of Origin and what could happen, which spawns the creation of Z, X, and Y, Mobius, creating the Endless Now. That's possible, something along those lines. I don't know if that's the story they're going to go or lean into, but I think it's a definite possibility, because why else would you, well, fan service, but Monolith tends to make a lot of the decision making when it comes to this story matter in some way. This could be one of the reasons we are seeing Shulk and Rex again, outside of just, let's see what the boys are up to, which, I mean, I'm fine with personally, but I'm just saying, if they want to expand on that, there's room to do it. Samuel Unknown has a very interesting one here, with Alvis is not the third Aegis. A is. Alvis was carrying her core crystal, and his gift to Melia was the crystal. This one's pretty interesting, because all he says, all that he admits to, is saying, I am Monado, which throws a lot of people off, but he could also mean that literally, and that he's actually A's Monado in some way. Because think of it like this, we know how Numa and Logos operate as core crystals because the restructuring of the worldly principles that Klaus utilized in Xenoblade 2 in the world of Ulvest enabled the driver blade dynamic and enabled those cores to behave that certain way. But in Bionis, in the world of Xenoblade 1, we don't know how, say, the Ontos core crystal would operate on a fundamental level in that world, because it doesn't have those overall worldly structures that Klaus from Xenoblade 2 enacted in Ulvest. So having the Monado materialize for the Aegis in the form of Alvis could be what's going on here. I'm not sure how likely this one is, but it would explain a few things. Namely, one, why Alvis operated in such a passive role in Xenoblade 1 and elected for Shulk to do a lot of the heavy lifting, and kind of just be the guiding hand, or the Yoda to Shulk's Luke Skywalker. Because Alvis was just a blade without a wielder. Sure, he had some powers, but his full potential wasn't unlocked yet. Something could have changed going into Xenoblade 3's DLC, or going into Ionios. Again, I kind of think it's more likely that something happens to Alvis which causes A to form or reincarnate from Alvis. But they could be pulling a giant bait and switch here, because it is interesting how we only saw the Ontos core crystal on Alvis with Definitive Edition. It was originally a key in Xenoblade 1. So it's possible that the intended or the original interpretation of what would happen with that key was that that key would have to be used to awaken Ontos, maybe. It would be interesting to see the key return in some capacity, but again, one of those wait and sees. Now, the more and more I think about this next one, I'm kind of leaning towards it. We move on to Taylor, who says the last part of the trailer shows an Aegis Flesh Eater, and that's why the core is glowing like that. We've seen Blade Eaters before. We've seen Flesh Eaters before. We haven't seen an Aegis Flesh Eater, nor do we know what powers that would enable. It would kind of explain why Matthew looks so horrified. Even her words at the very end are, Matthew, always in Fantasyland. If we assume those lines come from that scene in the trailer, and they aren't just spliced together, which I kind of think they are, but if we assume that they happen in that scene, it could be Niall reacting or talking to a distressed Matthew after seeing Niall essentially eat A to become an Aegis Flesh Eater. For whatever reason, whether it is to be able to initiate an interlink with Matthew to begin with, or to gain more power to fight back against Mobius to avenge the fallen kids, or whatever machinations Niall is trying to think up here, there's possibilities here. And expanding on the idea of an Aegis Flesh Eater, look, I think it sounds pretty freaking cool, I'm not gonna lie to you. Now, let's talk about Little Fence's theory. Maybe Zed will be a hero-type party member. I don't want to explain why it could be possible. Would be pretty amazing. Now, the one piece of evidence I think we kind of have to maybe give some kind of credence to this is that one scene from the new trailer recontextualizes the teaser trailer, where Zed is also there with Rex and Shulk confronting Alvis. I could see this happening for maybe a quest or even maybe just one situation. Like how in Xenoblade 2, we could play with Jin or Malos in a handful of sections because the story called for it. I could see something along those lines happening with Zed or even N against Alvis in this situation. I don't know how probable it is, but if it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen in that context, and probably won't be a permanent thing. We have Zohar Shaked here saying, this is genuinely, not kidding, a sequel, sort of. It's, in my opinion, honestly both. I feel like we are being led astray here. As pointed out, Ionios is a pocket dimension in a singular point of time, which is the crash of the two worlds of Kevers and Agnes. Due to it being a single point in time, there is hypothetically no before or after. Where am I going with this? Somehow, I feel like the ending of base Xenoblade 3 affected directly all points in quote-unquote time, or the Ionios timeline to be specific. That came before it, due to it being a single point in time. So essentially what they're saying there is that if something massive happens in the timeline of Ionios, because Ionios only happens in a singular moment of time, that they could write it in such a way where it happens at all points of Ionios because it's all that singular point of time. What the modern Ouroboros did affected every point in this timeline, including the one in Future Redeemed. Imagine them fighting and then all of a sudden, boom, time flows again. Ionios ceases to exist, regardless of if you're a second after its creation or at the actual time in which they beat Mobius for good. In my opinion, there is or was an actual normal ending to Future Redeemed in which they end up being founders and the war keeps on, which leads to us going to Xenoblade 3. Maybe we lost this time, but hope moves on, yada yada. But instead, we'll get a different ending. Something, for some reason, gave an opening to defeat them for good, a connection to all points in time, which all together led to the destruction of Mobius. Not sure how they'll do this, but I love this idea a lot. And honestly, again, I don't know about the practicality of it, but it's a very interesting opinion. It's a very interesting theory. My one concern is that it could confuse some people, and would require some very careful explaining to understand the time component of it. Where essentially, since Ionios all takes place in this one little slice, this one sliver, this one point of time, by defeating Mobius in the base game, that would affect that entire point of time, which could thrust the Liberators back out of Ionios. And you could tell a story like that, and deal with the possible consequences of that. Do they regain or retain their memories, or do they not? Do maybe some of them do, or some of them not? Could Origin have a glitch, and certain characters get put into different worlds? That's an entire plot line that has not really been talked about yet, that they could easily expand on. It's just, they messed up, and there's a glitch in the software of Origin. It's probably a very complicated system, where they're not able to have test runs outside of maybe simulations. Any glitch, like a missing bracket or something, could possibly just throw a soul into the wrong world. Like maybe Shulk and Rex swap worlds, or that's maybe what happened to Noah at the end of Xenoblade 3. There's a lot of potentiality when it comes to a theory like this, and with the way the world is structured and the way it operates, because it's all based off of light as a basic component that builds up on everything, but also because Ionios took place in a singular moment of time. So if you're wanting into the weeds of that and talk about time travel, or just time manipulation, you could come up with some wild and wacky theories here that I think could be explored if that's the direction they want to go. We move on to William Umbranox, who says at the end, everyone wakes up and realizes they are still stuck on Mira. That would be the wildest ending to me. And honestly, call me an agent of chaos, because I'm kind of liking this. Just, I want to see all the reaction videos that would come about after this would occur, where everyone's just thrown into Mira from Xenoblade Chronicles X. Everyone just has scales. Welcome to New LA. The theme song's blaring in the background. Like, I control my whole. You see Elma and the crew just annihilating a few indigens or some giant robots or a spaceship or whatever. It would be a wild way to end the DLC, and I would be so there for it. Especially as a fan of X. And honestly, yeah, maybe it's not the best when it comes to a storytelling perspective. Or it would come out of left field, or it would make no sense. But sometimes, you gotta lean into the memes. Yeah, you gotta sometimes just lean into the memes. Oh god, the game ends with a Tatsu is food joke. That's how it ends. That's how we wrap up everything. Takahashi announces retirement. Tatsu makes a food joke. And they just walk off into the sunset, never to be seen again. Oh no. Oh god, this is cursed, but honestly it would also be hilarious. At least to me. Continuing to talk about Nopon, let's talk about Cool Dog's theory here, where Riku actually existed pre-Ionios, and just ended up being raised by Riki, and trained by Tora. I think there's some credence to this, because Riku is often associated with Kevez, so it's possible that he actually just comes from the world of the Bionis. And we know they've liked to talk about or at least talk about Riki's kids in the past. So maybe Riku is just another one of those kids like Nene and Kino. I mean, it's possible he was trained by Toro while in Ionios at some point if Toro's around anywhere. I think the information we have at our disposal right now kind of suggests it's more Shulk. But that again reinforces the whole Riki from Keves or Xenoblade 1 theory. I mean, Riku. I always mix up Riki and Riku, by the way. That's just a thing that happens to me. We know Riku is in this DLC, so they could expand on that. And maybe even if they show a post-credit scene of Mio's perspective, maybe we see Riku walking about in the world of Keves or something. It's possible. Now, for a penultimate theory, let's talk about Shadow Fox 7's opinion, or theory here. If Consul N is here, and assuming he unalived Grams, his son, he can assume that M will appear shortly after in the DLC, because she does appear and confront N, and says, "What have you done?" at least in the base game, so she could appear and could be a secret ally, like how she gave the key to Nia Castle, and could help the party, I don't know. I think there is something to be said for this theory. It was oddly, well, I guess odd, how we didn't see M in the trailer, but we saw N. We know N is there. So they could be saving what M's role is for the DLC, for that to be a surprise or something. I think we'll probably at least see her at some point, her secretly helping out the Liberators and giving them intel or feeding them information or giving them necessary items to proceed forward, as I think is a possibility. For all we know, she could also be the courier between Nia with the Ouroboros Stone and the Liberators. That's a possibility, I think. It doesn't contradict anything that I'm aware of, and it makes complete sense in terms of the character's story, in my opinion. So let's move on to the final theory for today's video before the DLC drops. We have Blooper Tanuki, who says Zanza's cycle of recreation was actually preventing Mobius from ever appearing. In fact, the first flames of Mobius started when Dunban wished for peace to last forever after the end of Xenoblade 1. Now, I think it could be two things. It could be the fact that Zanza, like you said, Blooper, was sort of maintaining a cycle of sorts, where he would give life to people on the Bionis, restart it all, rinse, repeat over and over and over again. Or at least that was his intention. And because of that, people on the whole didn't have the collective desire to stop time or to stop the present moment in eternity, which was the condition that we are aware of right now that spawned X, Y, and Z as Mobius. Dunban wishing for peace to last forever could have just been an interesting recontextualization, or it could be some absolute Jimmy Neutron style of foreshadowing that puts Attack on Titan to shame. Where essentially after the events of both games, Xenoblade 1 and 2, both really the worlds were satisfied. They don't want that happiness to really change, because they both just got out of horrendous situations into infinitely better ones. So they could absolutely expand on that idea and expand on the idea that, hey, yeah, you fought for this tomorrow that you want, but you have to be willing to let it go as well. And this stagnation that a lot of people asked for in these post-Xenoblade 1 and 2 worlds led to Mobius forming in the first place. I think that was one of their kind of intentions with Xenoblade 3 to begin with, but also building on the fear that came about with the worlds colliding. But if they kept the worlds colliding to be kind of like this top secret thing outside of just, building Origin, then people wishing for a stagnant reality where the present moment is able to live on forever, or even if they knew that something was coming to whisk away their happiness and bring oblivion, yeah, honestly, I can see it, because within the confines of the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2, in Allrest and in Xenoblade 1, the worlds weren't really situated where people would want to preserve that. They wanted some way to get out of those situations and to protect themselves, to constantly keep moving into the future. On some level, but afterwards, when the fight's all over, yeah, you want to probably preserve that. So I think there's a perspective there that makes sense. And with that, I must bid you all an adieu. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great day. Hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload in the future and when I stream, because I'll be streaming this DLC on this channel. I'll be covering it in extensive detail. You know it. Stay safe. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Have a great day. Go play some video games if you can. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.